Heidrea for Heroes strives each day to give back to our deserving military veterans by assisting them through challenges and transitions in civilian life. A registered nonprofit organization based in Plymouth, we provide support services to veterans who need a helping hand from throughout southeastern Massachusetts. We offer a range of services, including adaptive home renovations, vehicle modifications, specialized mobility equipment, qualified home repairs, and custom veteran and family support. If you or someone you know is a veteran in need of assistance, please contact us to fill out an application. We also offer workforce readiness programs for veterans, including a Success Readiness series, which features seminars and webinars on job seeking and life skills, as well as Incline Corps, a unique monthly fitness program exclusively for veterans. To learn more about Heidrea for Heroes or our programs, to watch a webinar, or to make a donation to support our work, please visit our website at www.heidreaforheroes.org. That's HEIDREA, the number 4, HEROES.org. Our veterans sacrificed a great deal to serve our country. It is our great honor to give back by lending a helping hand.
All right, first of all, thank you for coming. An hour of time is valuable, and I appreciate you being willingness to give it up. And hopefully I can give you back something in the next hour that'll be helpful, that'll help you. What we've titled is How to Promote Yourself and Ask for Referrals, which is in a lot of circles better known as networking. How do we network? How do we connect with the right people? How do we, in some ways, promote ourselves? And I guess I'll start with a couple of caveats and tell you a little bit about what I do and who I work with, so what the context for some of this stuff might be. And then in general, hopefully you can tell me a little bit about how you might want to use it so we can customize it and tailor it as we go along. So as Amy said, my name's Eric Warner. I own a company called Praxis Growth Advisors. We're a leadership development company. And we work with business leaders, individuals that are looking to improve in a variety of ways, whether it's managing their resources and their teams, whether it's understanding their customers better and growing their businesses or their organizations. And many of the people that I work with are seasoned professionals that have been selling for a long time, that have been dealing with client relations, that have been managing people. And there's a constant theme I get from all of them. They all hate networking. They don't like the idea of going out to a group of people that they don't know anybody. They're not quite sure what they're going to encounter when they get there. And they're worried that if they go and ask people for something, they might get turned down. And they might not feel good about that. So networking is one of those things that's hard. Even people that work in professions that do it for a living don't like to do it. When I think about the concept of networking, it's got lots of different applications. You may be looking to transition from one career to another, and you've got to go out and meet people that are not in your current line of work, and you've got to find people that might be able to get you to a new place that you want to go. You might be in your own company and trying to find new clients, and you've got to go out and network with people that can help you open doors and find things. You might be doing something philanthropic and you want to help raise money and raise awareness, and to do that you might have to go out and meet some people that aren't aware and open some doors. So networking has a lot of different applications and places where it can be put to work. Not all of it is focused on what's going to happen today. A lot of people say to me, well, I went to these networking events. I actually had a client of mine who went to a networking event, and she came back, and it was at my urging that she went to these networking events, and she came back with a stack of business cards and handed them to me. I said, what are you doing with the cards? These are all the people you met last night? She said, yeah. I said, why are you giving me the cards? She said, well, none of them are prospects for me. Maybe you can do something with them. And I said, okay, but who do they know that might be able to help you? Are any of these people involved in circles where they might be able to influence something or somebody that might help you get to the next phase with a company, with a prospect, with a relationship, with a partnership that you're trying to build? who do they know in their circles that might be able to help you get an introduction? And she said, I didn't think about it that way. I just thought I was going there to meet somebody who could do something for me today. So networking is one of those functions that it's kind of like investing in the stock market, if anybody plays in the stock market at all. It's not about, you might buy a stock and tomorrow it goes up 25%. That's called good timing. That's, you got lucky to a certain extent. Or, more likely it's a methodical, long-term approach. You're doing a lot of diversified activities. You're doing a lot of different things that produce a result over the long term. And the more you do of it, the more comfortable you get and the better off you are. So I'm not sure what brought you here today, and I'm hopefully can ask a little bit and you can tell me a little bit so I can change the context. But networking is one of those really broad things that no matter where you are in your career, your own personal journey, how you network and make people aware of who you are, what you do, how you add value, the kind of challenges that you help solve for people is critically important to help them understand who they should introduce you to, right? Because it's not always about, did you meet somebody today that can help you with something? It's how well have you built that network around you so when you need something, whatever it may be, you know who to turn to get it done. Right, so that's what we'll talk about today, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that exist. So here's what we're going to do. Do a little bit of a group discussion, if we could, to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have. And I know that sharing challenges in a room of people where you're not always, you don't know everybody, and you don't want to open up and talk about some of the challenges. I can assure you, I am a professional trainer. And I network as part of my business, and I don't like it. I have challenges with it all the time, and I know how to do it. Hopefully going to teach you a little bit about how to do it. It's not easy. So hopefully with that as a backdrop, we can talk a little bit about it. I'll also talk a bit, I'll use networking, promoting yourself, and getting referrals all kind of interchangeably. Because most people network because they want to get introduced to somebody who will help them get somewhere that they want to go, better known as a referral. Who do you know that I should know that we should talk to? We'll talk a little bit about where some of this comes from. A lot of the things that ultimately we find hold us back are not lack of doing something. It's the mindset that we bring to the table when we're trying to do something. So the attitude that we take influences the behavior that we put forth, and we may work on some technique today that might help you be more effective and be more comfortable in the process. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk a little bit through some solutions. And what I always ask is a couple things. I'm going to present some ideas to you. I'm going to ask you for some input and some ways to customize. But when we leave, I'm going to ask, if you could, to share with me what you learned. And more importantly, are you going to take action on something? What might it be? And you might tell me that I just came and I wanted to listen and I learned some stuff and I'm not going to do anything with it, and that's fine. But if you hear something that's interesting in here that you want to put to use, I'd love it if you could share with me what it is and tell me what specific action that you're going to take. And you'll probably hear from me down the line of how you doing? How's this working for you? So does that all sound fair? As I said, if it's too much, you just tell me and we can stop at any time. So, and we'll pull everybody else in here. This is not going to be just, solely on you guys, right? We've got lots of input we can pull in for this. But my takeaway when we're done is I'm going to ask you for what'd you take away? And I gave you some handouts that you can, work through. That gave you some copies of some of the slides that you can take with you, but also, some things that we might want to work through. So let's start with a couple of key questions, and one of them is on the top of that sheet. When you think about the idea of networking or getting referrals or meeting people that you don't know that might move you in a direction, what frustrates you? What are some of the challenges that you run into? And where do you think some of those come from? So I phrased it slightly differently on the page that you have in front of you than what you have on the screen here. But when you think about the concept of referrals, if you could do it better, what would that involve? Take a second, think about that for a second. From a networking perspective, if you could be a better networker, what are some of the things that frustrate you, and what could you do differently to maybe make it easier? So take a second, jot something down. All right, so what'd you come up with?
Well, I'd like to see more of the target audience that I really want to reach. And one of the problems, I have solutions that they're not even aware of, because primarily I deal with the elderly for Medicare.
Okay.
And the problem is they don't even know how to articulate some of the things that they need. And secondly, they're totally unaware of some of the pitfalls and dangers they could be in. I was an auditor in the government for 30 years in the program, and I've been in the insurance industry for 24 as a sideline as well. And even people today that are in the industry don't know half of what I know, and it annoys me when I hear people say things that are absolutely wrong and could lead people down the wrong path, and it can cost them an absolute ton of money if you don't know what you're doing when you make a selection. And some of them are permanent.
Okay.
Well, when I say permanent, I mean you select it for the year. You can't bail out until the end of the year.
Okay.
So you're stuck with what you got, and that can be deductibles, it can be co-pays, it can be non-covered services. There's a number of things that can affect them, and they get led down a primrose path and they don't know. I don't know how to reach all these people just to tell them, you know, there's a right way and a wrong way. And there's also some tricks to the trade that I know that I'll guarantee you that 99.9% of the people don't know them. And it's a way to not only save money, but a way to really use the system to your benefit. And I'd like to get the word out there, and it's difficult to do.
Okay, so it's about getting the message to the right people who are probably receptive to hear it, but also, dealing with some folks that maybe think they know what they're doing, but they don't, and trying to bridge the gap between who wants to listen, who should be listening, and where are they to find them.
Absolutely. And some of the people think they have adequate coverage and have what they need, and in fact they don't, because they haven't had an incident yet that requires them to be hospitalized or to see a specialist or something like that. So they think they're fine until it comes to claim submission. Then they find out they're not so fine,
So is the challenge finding the places to go to talk to those folks, or is it once you're there, getting them to kind of engage?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of finding them more than anything else, because there's a whole bunch of people that are fishing in the same pond. So it's it's difficult to sometimes I show up late after somebody had already made a decision and it's too late.
Okay, so all right, so there's the where do we go? How do we get the people to engage when we get there? And then how do you stand out from other people that are doing the same thing? Okay. So differentiation, venue, getting people to pay attention, and then not sounding like everybody else that's there. Okay. All right. How about yourself?
He's doing a great job.
He's got it all covered?
He does.
All right. Okay. So did you have, no, I was going to say, so the context doesn't always have to be, as I said in the beginning, it's not always about, I've got something I need to sell. I've got, maybe a place that I want to go. It could also be trying to get stuff done in your own company, right? How do you network with the people that can get stuff done, that can remove roadblocks for you, that, are challenged in, kind of who do I need to know to get stuff done? Sometimes that's an act of, do I know the right people that can make things happen? So I don't know if that helps at all. So,
I think for me, I'm challenged with kind of building a relationship from cold. I'm okay when I have an intermediary connection.
Yeah.
I can kind of launch from that on personal connections. But sort of breaking the ice and being better at the small talk that kind of lead to, you're not going to dive right in and ask that person for what it is you might be after in the long run. So kind of finding those personal connections and doing that whole small talk thing. Not very good.
So, all right, so my memory's not as strong as it used to be. Let me make sure I get all these down. I heard, can I write on this? I think so. Okay, so we have venue, we have engaging. Now, a couple caveats. I'm not that bright. I did a couple grades more than once. So, and part of that is I'm dyslexic. I can't spell. So if I write something and I'm left-handed and I scribble, so if it's scribbled and not spelled correctly, my fault.
You just erase it as you go along.
That's right. Usually I just kind of follow along. So finding the right venues, engaging, getting people to engage with you. I'm just going to go difference here because I can't spell differentiated. So venue, engaging, creating a difference between everybody else in the room. And this is kind of that warm, see, here we go again, warm versus cold intro, right? How do you make it warm from a cold one? And then I heard a little bit of the small talk, right? How do you kind of move people to maybe into this engagement? Okay, so taking it from here so that they'll engage. Okay, okay. Anything else that we should talk about? Was that was it on your end? Anything on your side?
I think sometimes it's difficult to come up with an introduction early on that sort of lets them know that you should continue to have a conversation. So sort of like what this gentleman said earlier, they may have a problem that they don't know is a problem yet.
Absolutely.
And so you have a solution for them, but it's a bit complicated what you have to tell them. So that takes a little time, but you only have a little bit of time.
So I paraphrase that into kind of an opening hook. Right? How do you get somebody to engage and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should keep talking?
Right.
Okay, so opening hook and then kind of continuous conversation. Okay. Okay. All right. Anything else we should talk about? Okay, so I'm not sure how much I'll talk about venues today, but I will give you an exercise at the end that might help you think about where the venues are. Venues can be tough, right? There's a lot of places to go and network, right? If you go and Google networking opportunities in the South Shore, you're going to get a list of a bunch of places you can go to. There's a professional networking group, there's the chambers of commerce, there's a variety of places. I'm sure there's associations and there's a variety of things that you can get into to get there, but you don't know if the audience that you want is going to be at those, right? There's also a lot of venues, some of which we'll talk about, that are not actually physical venues where you would go and show up and shake hands, but you might go online and you might start some of your dialogues that way. And we'll talk a little bit about not necessarily where to go, but how to create diversification in that. Because it's not always about being in the right place, it's about being in a lot of places, and is it easier to do that. We'll talk about how to engage, we'll talk about how to create a difference, that warm versus cold, and some ways to hook your audience to find out if you should have a conversation and then to keep the dialogue flowing. So I think we'll cover a lot of that stuff. I thought it might make sense, since I do a lot of this work, we've kind of amassed a list of here are some of the things that happen when we're in this networking process that tend to throw us off track, right? That have a tendency to take us in a direction that we don't want to go, or to set the process in the wrong direction off from the start, which causes us to go off track. So these are the themes that we'll go through, and I'll talk about these in a little bit greater depth, but I'll just rattle through them quickly, right? The first one is surprising your contact with an unanticipated request. Nobody likes surprises, and when you hit somebody out of the blue with something, they have a tendency to react in a way that you probably don't want them. Expecting to receive, right? We all go to networking events in a lot of ways with self-interest in mind, right? We want to get something out of it, otherwise we wouldn't be investing our time in it. Sometimes we have to check that at the door to make sure that we're not there with ourselves in mind only, that we're there with others in mind and how we should do with that. Not being able to articulate who you want to meet. Right? So your ideal client if you're selling something, your target introduction if you're looking to network and broaden a message or find a new role or change careers, whatever it may be, what are you looking for? If you don't know, we talk about, social media is one of those amazing fascinations. If you're out on social media trying to connect with somebody and there's 300 million people on social media and you don't know who you're looking for, you're not going to be able to find them, right? Very difficult. So who's your target client? Equating limited behaviors with expected results, right? I went to the networking event, nobody came up and bought anything from me, nobody offered me a job, I was there. That's not necessarily how you measure, did we get success? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Hiding behind your emotions, right? This one's hard, right? We are creatures of emotion, and sometimes we let our emotions cloud good decision making and good judgment about how we should conduct ourselves in some of these situations. Asking for referrals versus asking for introductions. Sometimes I don't even like to go as far as an introduction. Ask for information. And if an introduction is there, maybe it'll happen. So we'll talk a little bit about the balance there. Patience in unrealistic expectations. I think we talked a little bit about this with the stock market analogy, right? If you expect to buy a stock and it's going to go up 20% tomorrow, chances are you're going to end up disappointed, right? But if we have a more patient approach and we align our expectations accordingly, then we might see a better result, right? Selling the way we buy, a term that we use a lot in a lot of the programs I run, which is head trash. Head trash are all those voices in our head that convince us to not to do things that we should do, or to do things that we shouldn't do that get us into some trouble. But networking in a lot of ways is a selling activity. You're selling yourself, you're selling your company, you're selling your product, you're selling what you might have to offer. And sometimes the way that we consume things influences how we try to sell ourselves, which sometimes clouds the picture of how we should execute. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I think I just mentioned this one in terms of venues. How do we engage across multiple cross sets? So that's what we're going to talk about in the next, say, 30 minutes or so. Is there anything else that's not on that list that you might want to talk about? Going once, twice?
I mean, maybe follow-up falls into one of those categories, but once you've had that introduction or gotten that referral, just like a continuous dialogue.
So then what happens when you leave the event? Is that what you're?
Leave the event, yeah, for sure. And then
Okay.
even if you have the one-time conversation after the event, maybe there was reason from the event to make that phone call, but then if that doesn't result in your ultimate goal, how do you kind of continue to create that dialogue?
Okay.
For a longer term.
So how do you stay engaged longer term? Okay. Yeah, and some of that will be weaved in here. So we'll cover that too. Okay? Anything else? No? Good? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about maybe some of you have been in a situation where somebody has done something at a networking event or an opportunity where you're trying to meet others that's made you uncomfortable. What does that sound like? Has anybody had an experience where someone's come up to you, whether it's in a group setting, might have been at your Memorial Day, weekend holiday party. Somebody came up and, I tend to see some of these folks everywhere I go. They come in, they've got a purpose in mind, and all of a sudden they're either throwing cards at you or they're asking you, do you know this person? Do you know that person? Can you talk to me? And we all of a sudden we start to get, yikes. So has anybody had one of those experiences? No? Okay.
I think I probably have. I don't know if I can
Pinpoint it now? Yeah.
that.
So sometimes when we surprise a prospect or a contact or a contact with an unanticipated request, you may find somebody who comes up. I was at a networking venue one day and somebody came up to me and we were talking casually and in mid-sentence cut me off and said, I'm going to tell you what I do and then you can tell me who you know that might need what I have. I said, okay. It was bold, right? Fairly direct, right? Come right out and say it. Yeah. How do you think that worked? Right. Yeah. You know what? Hold on. Hold your thought. Look at that. My drink's empty. I'll be right back. Right. So sometimes we get that. I mean, you get the overly aggressive that will come at you and hit you with things that you're not expecting, or it's this. There's folks that are very good at networking and they know before you get there who you are. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Like, oh, I've seen you. What's that?
I work for one of those people.
Yeah, so they know who you are, they know what you do, and they get there and they say, hey, I know you know so-and-so, can you introduce me? Right? Without any really precursor of why and where it goes. So the worst thing we can do here is surprise people with things, right? Maybe it's, hey, I met you at this, we had a brief conversation. In your follow-up call, you're calling them up, hey, let's go get lunch together. Let's spend a half an hour and talk more. And they're not really even clear on what it is that you talked about, because maybe they met a bunch of people. And the concept of showing up and doing something else is the furthest thing from their mind of what they wanted to do next. So we don't want to surprise them, right? We want to be open and clear about what it is that we're trying to do and how we want to talk about it. And one of the concepts that we work with in a lot of our programs is a concept called an upfront contract. And an upfront contract is one of these very small techniques where we help gain commitment from both parties. What is it that we would likely talk about? right? How much time we might need to commit to this, right? And at a networking event, it might be as simple as, hey, maybe we can take a couple minutes. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what you do and why you came here tonight and what it was that that you're trying to achieve here. And then maybe I can spend a couple minutes to tell you a little bit about why I'm here and what I do, and maybe you can help. And maybe when we're done, we'll decide if whether or not it makes any sense for us to spend more time together, or whether or not there really isn't a reason for us to talk more. And if that's the case, no hard feelings. Not everybody's here to fit with each other. So this looks very structured, right? We have time. Why are we going to talk? What is each person going to do? But the really important piece of this is that you get clarity on who's going to do what. Now, whether it's at the networking event itself, or at the situation where you're trying to get connected, or whether it's on the follow-up call, right? So maybe the follow-up call sounds something like, look, it was great to meet you the other day. We talked a little bit about maybe spending 15 minutes or so to talk further about some of the people that we might know based on some of the things that we learned about each other. And at the end, we'll decide if there's anybody in my world that you might want some information on, and anybody in your world that I could give, that I might look for some information on. And then we can decide what the best path forward is. Maybe it's an introduction, maybe it's a referral, maybe it's nothing at all, but we'll talk through that. Does that sound fair? And you gain some kind of an agreement, so there's no surprises, right? Things aren't popping up in front of them saying, oh, geez, this person's looking for an introduction to people. I had no idea that that's what we were going to talk about today. Simple concept, but we often find that when we don't get mutual expectations on what's, how much time we might have to invest, what exactly it is we're going to talk about, right? Maybe we had a great conversation about the Patriots with these people, and all they wanted to do was talk more about your theory on Tom Brady and Deflategate. And they had no idea that you wanted to talk to them about the insurance product that you represent. Now we have a problem. Somebody's uncomfortable, and you're probably not going to get where you want to go, right? So it's a very simple, agreement on time, agreement on what we're going to talk about, define what they should expect from you and what you should expect from them, and then gain agreement on the decision and the outcome, right? Very simple concept. Sometimes just simply thinking in your head, okay, how long will this take? What are we going to talk about? What are we going to decide? Key thing there, the decision, the outcome at the end should involve some mutual activity, right? What are you going to do for them? What might they do for you? And if they don't want to participate in the activity, well, at least you're clear that there's really not a good next step there, and you can go move on to someplace else where they might be. Make sense? Any thoughts or questions on this one? Okay. Number two, this one's a big one. This one is much more of a mindset than it is a technique or an activity, but this drives behavior. The mindset of networking is not all about what's in it for you. It's about what can you do for others, right? And going in with the mindset of who might I know that can help this person? What knowledge do I have? What connections do I have? What do I bring to the table that could help some of the people that I'm here to engage with? A lot of times we park that and we think, okay, I'm going to this networking event. I've got to have my game face on. I've got to be able to, tell these people who I am and why I'm different, and get my message out to as many people as possible. But psychology tells us that people who we've helped want to help us in return. So if we go with that mindset of, I'm going to go here and look to find 5 or 6 people that I might be able to make an introduction for, that I might be able to give some good guidance to, that I might be able to put in, onto somebody to help them, and we try to measure that versus measuring how many business cards that I hand out and how many names that I get or follow-up calls that I have. We pay it forward a little bit to the what will happen if we give before we look to get. I have a client, one of my favorite clients, who every Friday morning, if you're lucky enough, you're behind her in the Dunkin' Donuts line, she picks up the order that's already been ordered by the person behind her. It's her pay it forward. Makes her feel good. She actually had somebody chase her down and say to her, "What did you do that for? I don't want anybody to buy me my stuff." And she's like, "I was just trying to be nice." poor girl got assaulted by this woman, this guy who didn't want her to pay for a coffee. But her mindset is, if I do a little thing like that, it'll pay dividends in some way, shape, or form down the line, right? Same concept here. If we go into network expecting to receive, and we go into a venue where there's people that we could possibly meet, and we're looking for something, trouble finding it, right? But if we go in with the mindset of, hey, I'm here because this is a community activity, we're going to network, we're going to help people across the board, might connect a little bit stronger. Make sense? So this one is I think all these are important. This one's critical, right? We often, I'll ask people, particularly when I'm in working with a group that sells something, and I'll ask them, tell me what your ideal client is. Who is going to buy what you have? Who needs what you've got to offer? What challenges or problems might they have? Can you describe to somebody what it is that they should be looking for to help you, right? If we don't know what we're looking for, very hard to find it. And I'll give you an example of this one. This one is, this is a true story. This happened. I was at a networking event and I was talking to a gentleman that was there. And I said to him, so what brought you here tonight? Who are you trying to meet? And he said, well, I'm looking for the guy who is got the best suit, shiniest shoes, his hair's perfect, he might have a big watch, he's probably driving a fast car. I want to meet that guy. And I looked at him kind of quizzically and said, okay, how come? And he said, those kind of people tend to have the kind of things that I can help people with. I said, all right, fair enough. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, a guy pulls up in a white Jaguar, steps out, spends a few minutes in the reflection of his Jaguar, making sure that he's all put together and looking good. He's got a watch on that's the size of Texas. He comes rolling in like he owns the place. And I happened to make eye contact with the guy I was talking to and gave him a little sign. He said, yep, and walked over and went and struck up a conversation with this guy. And sure enough, I saw him about a month later. I said, hey, how'd you make out with the guy with the white Jaguar? And he said, no, we were building a relationship. I said, interesting. I'm going to leave out what he does for the sake of, well, I'm just going to leave that out. But the point was, he could very clearly articulate to me who he wanted to meet. When I saw who he wanted to meet, immediately said, hey, you should probably connect with this guy. And that's a very provincial example. But the reality is, if you can't describe to somebody who you're looking for and what they look like, how are they going to help you find them? Right? How are you going to know when you've stumbled upon this person? So I'd ask you to take a second. If you think about it from the perspective of maybe you're trying to sell a product. Maybe you're trying to meet somebody that will take you to the next level of your career. Maybe you're looking for a mentor. Maybe you're looking for someone who can help you. How do you describe that person? Take a second, if you could. Jot down a couple things. How would you describe your ideal client? Your ideal person to be introduced to? The ideal introduction that you want? And what characteristics might they involve? Anybody want to share what they have?
Well, in the Medicare industry, once you turn 65, by the way, it's a startling demographic if you don't know it, but 10,000 people per day are turning 65 for the next 17 years. 10,000 a day. There's 77 million people. People don't realize what that number represents.
Sure.
Okay, so these people coming in now, in the beginning for the supplemental things to add on to Medicare, for the first 6 months, there's absolutely no underwriting whatsoever. So it doesn't matter what your health condition is. You can be in a wheelchair and have an oxygen cannula and all this, they have to write you. Yeah. In Massachusetts, we happen to be one of the more liberal states on that. The only underwriting is if you have end-stage renal disease. But in other states like New Hampshire and others, if you miss that first 6 months and you have a health problem, you got more than a health problem. You've got a financial problem. Okay. So you really have to know what you're doing. So what I wanted to do was, because I'm licensed in a few states, is get in touch with those people. Let me just begin that. I used to be an auditor for the federal government for 30 years, and that's living on the dark side. I'm from the federal government here to help you. Nah, they're scared to death of you. Right. And it's like Darth Vader walking in. You know? So once I changed that and I got in the insurance industry, I'm here to help people. It's entirely different. Now they're happy to see me. But a lot of people really don't understand the ins and outs of this program. You try to navigate it. it's easier to figure out Rubik's Cube. I mean, and the instructions from the federal government are actually pretty terrible if you're trying to go through it. So
you're looking for people who are turning 65.
Turning 65 regardless of health,
Confused.
but you're absolutely confused.
Yeah.
And get to them before they make a mistake.
So they haven't made decisions.
Haven't made a decision yet. No.
Okay.
And depending on what they have, even though they can accept it in anything, you have products that are bargain basement, and then you have the Cadillac ones, and they have others in between.
Sure.
And depending on what you would need for underwriting, what meds you're on, what diseases you have, and all that, then that dictates what you should do for your choice. You still don't know what you're doing. Okay. Because the Medicare booklet is like a phone book, literally.
Yeah.
And you can't read all those things and understand all the pitfalls and dangers in there. So I like to get in front of people, sit down, get their whole situation in front of me, and then direct them. I'm not going to tell them which one to get. I can't say we're not allowed to use the word best. You can't use superlatives.
Okay.
Of course, one of the ones I sell has been #1 for the last 11 years nationally. It's a local product, but it's in the nationally. It's in Consumer Reports. Every November they rank them. They've been #1 in the country the last one, but I can't say they're the best.
Okay. Yeah.
How ridiculous. But I mean, their coverage is fantastic, and depending on what you have, other people are turning 65 and they'll say, you have a gym membership that goes with it. Well, you don't need this, I mean, unless you get hit by a train or something. So,
all right, so
I know who I'm looking for, and that's like anybody turning 65.
Okay.
And I just want to get in front of the people that, regardless of their health situations or anything like that, they need the coverage. They know they need the coverage. They just don't know what they need.
Okay. So turning 65 and confused
Absolutely.
and need help sorting out options.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't realize they're going to be dropped from their group health plan. They might still be working.
Sure.
And then they're going to be dropped. And they don't even know it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I'm covered by Medicare. And then you got to pick up, if they're not covered by their plan at work, then they have to pay for Part B premium, which comes right out of that check and now it's $121 bucks a month.
I'll add a little bit of that to that. Might be assuming that they're all set.
Absolutely.
But not knowing that.
You get a shock when their HR people tell them you're no longer covered.
Gotcha. Okay. So now these are people that are they're not retired. They're currently employed.
Some will be retired. Some won't be retired. When you turn 65, you're eligible for Medicare, and if you're working, they'll throw you on there to get you off their health plan.
Okay.
Drop that premium.
So then I'm just trying to get clarity in my own mind. So turning 65, maybe employed and not realizing that their benefit structure is going to change just based on their age.
Or the ones that are retired now, they're leaving, and they just don't know what they're going to do for their health care coverage.
So now they're leaving and they got to figure that out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Same crowd.
Wouldn't you want to go for the members that are before they turn 65, so they have
Well,
an
yeah,
idea what to look
you can
at?
do that. They
Like
have lists of them.
between 62 and 64?
Well, 62 is way too early because the program's so dynamic. The way it is this year, it's not going to be that way next year.
Okay.
And
So you need the 64 to 65 and 3-month crowd. All right, so all of that aside, what I'm hearing is your ideal client is that 64 and a half to 65 and a quarter age range, maybe employed, maybe transitioning and becoming retired, and they're worried about what's going to happen with their health benefits.
They might not even be aware of what's going to happen.
Yeah, so they may be unaware or they're maybe concerned about their health benefits. Okay, so the reason I'm trying to boil that down is, typically when you go to a networking venue in some way, shape, or form, the more concisely you can hit that with, I'm looking for people that are 65 and 64 and a half to just turn 65. They're transitioning their medical coverage whether they know it or not, and they're probably confused about what's going to happen. And they might want to talk to somebody who can help them, right? I always tend to go to the 5th grade level of simplicity, right? Could I explain? I actually have a 5th grader at home, and I'll say to her something that I'm trying to get a point across on. If she can understand what I'm talking about, I know I've done a good job of simplifying it. So find yourself a 5th grader and explain to them what you do, and if they get it, you're good. Well, we always tend to go to I need to tell them all this stuff and educate them to so many levels, when the reality is, particularly in the networking world, you're just trying to meet people who can connect in some way, shape, or form with what you do and who you want to meet, so that it's more simple you make that, tell it at a 5th grade level, the chances of the other people getting it goes way up. Not to say that you want to talk down to these folks and make them think they're stupid, but just it's simplifying it. It's making, there's a big challenge. It's very easy to make the simple complicated. it's very hard to make the complicated simple. And the more we can simplify a complex message so people, get hit between the eyes with, oh, okay, you know what? I know somebody who fits that description, the easier, right? Go back to it's the slick hair, big watch, perfectly put together. Gentlemen, did you have anything for your ideal client?
Well, I guess I'm here with my hat on for Heidrea for Heroes for the organization, and we're always looking just to be able to inform people about what it is that we do and what we offer to veterans. And so, if we're out in a networking event, a BNI group or what have you, just trying to key in on those who have, particular affinity to veterans issues or maybe concern for veteran welfare. Maybe that person is a veteran or has family that had military service, and that they're accessible going forward as well, not just that particular point in time, but they're actually accessible to continue the conversation down the road and have kind of a community-centric view of the world.
Sure. Okay, so veterans that may exist in the community, they may be personally related, they may be them directly that are looking for avenues to
help, or just to help us spread the word, or perhaps they have capacity, to be honest with you, to support the mission. But really, because we're a relatively new organization on the scene, we're just trying to find those ambassadors for us.
Okay.
I guess that's maybe the word that I would use.
Sure. Okay, so find those that are willing to carry a message in some way, shape, or form, right? Okay. So, key takeaway on this, so again, I'll go back to the 5th grade analogy. If you can explain what you said to me to a 5th grader, and they're going to get it, you've succeeded, right? Make it simple, because the point at a networking event is not to educate people, it's to make a connection to figure out who those folks might know, that, or have the light bulb go off in their own head, say, that kind of sounds like me. Maybe I should have a conversation further with these people. So let's talk a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about some mindsets, we've talked a little bit about, a little bit of ways to talk about things, but let's talk a little bit about behavior, right? Equating limited behaviors with expected results. I hear from people all the time, networking is a waste of time. And, I'll ask them, okay, tell me why. I tend to probe lots of questions when people make statements like that. And what I often hear is, well, I didn't get anything out of it. I didn't meet anybody that was productive. I went a lot of time, the chicken was cold, it didn't taste very good, and the drinks were warm, and it was overall an uncomfortable experience. And I said, okay, well, when you were there, how many times did you describe to somebody what it is that you do and who you can help and why you came to the event? Did you connect with some of the people that are running the event? I often find the first person that I want to meet at a networking event that I have not been to before is the person who's in charge, right? Find out who they are and go ask them, who comes, right? This is what I do. Who do you think I should meet here? And it's interesting, they know everybody in the room, they put the group together, they can very quickly give you some information that might be very valuable. So we often equate an expectation by just showing up and being there and having our business cards that people will get it. Until we think a little bit about, okay, who am I here to meet, right? How did I pose the questions to ask and make an introduction that would get me to that next step? Because a lot of times we feel uncomfortable, we're not quite sure how to stage that introduction, so we stop. We don't do it. And we don't ask, right? Half the time at a networking event, there's a couple outcomes that you might have is, potentially the person you're talking to, are they a good connection for you? Are they a prospect for the product that you might have? Or do they know somebody who is, that they might want to connect you to? And the balance is, what are you asking them for? If they fit into that criteria of maybe they're a prospect, find out if they're willing to spend a few more minutes with you to talk a little bit further to find out if you can help them in any way, shape, or form. Not to try to sell them on the spot, right? That goes back to number one, which is don't surprise people. If you spring on somebody that you think is a prospect of yours and somebody that you want to connect with at the networking event and you try to sell them, you try to pitch them something, you try to be aggressive with what you want to get out of them, it probably fails because they're going to be surprised, but they're going to be very surprised by what happens. So how do you slow it down? What are you asking for, right? And ask for simple things, little things. Hey, maybe we could spend 15 minutes after this meeting, talk a little bit more, over a cup of coffee if we think that's necessary, et cetera. Would you be willing to take my phone call as a follow-up to this? as opposed to, hey, I'd love to tell you about this and this and this, and make sure you have this or you're going to be in trouble. Keep it casual, set the right venue. We go back to that upfront contract, set the agenda, the timeline, the purpose, and some decisions that will happen after the fact, right? You know, you always like to use the phrase, sometimes you got to slow down to speed up, right? If you take it a little bit slower at the networking event, the interactions after the fact will tend to go a lot faster, right? So think a little bit about, what are we trying to get out of this, right? We're not necessarily trying to sell anybody anything over there. We're not trying to close somebody. We're not trying to make an immediate introduction. We're trying to spread a message, get people to see us, know us, like us, trust us a little bit, and then they'll likely invite you in to talk more when the time is right on their terms. So think about what you're trying to get out of this and what the mindset needs to be to make that happen, and what behavior do you want to measure? How many people did I help? How many people were willing to take my call after the fact, and then do the follow-up after the fact. Hiding behind your emotions, right? The challenge we have with this is a lot of us go to networking events and we're uncomfortable. And when we're uncomfortable, we make people around us uncomfortable. So how do we get ourselves to be uncomfortable? Or how do we get ourselves to be comfortable and not be uncomfortable when we're at these events, right? Our fear of things affects our behaviors, right? If we're worried about, interrupting somebody, or if you're having a conversation with somebody that you know is going nowhere and you don't know how to kind of transition that conversation away, we do awkward things where we just kind of walk away, or we're talking to somebody and we're doing this, where we're, oh yeah, oh sure, yeah, and we're looking over their heads. There's a lot of discomfort that gets created. So sometimes just simply thinking ahead of time about yourself, how can I avoid the discomfort that comes with networking? Goes back to, okay, I'm not here to get anything. I'm here to give. I'm here to listen and understand and see how I can help others. Just that simple mindset puts a lot of comfort at ease, because suddenly you're not asking anybody for anything, right? But if we go in there with I got to meet people, I need to go get my message out, and I need to talk to as many people as possible, we have a tendency not to stay connected with the people we're talking to and move quickly. If we are talking to somebody and we haven't kind of set the groundwork, hey, let's take a couple minutes, talk a little bit about what we do, and if there's a reason for us to keep talking, we will. We have a tendency to drift towards comfortable things like the weather, the sports teams, the food that's being served, things that are common, which are good, but at some point in time you need to make a decision, is this somebody who's worth investing my time in the long run? And that might sound cold and callous, but the reality is we go to these networking events for a purpose. If we can't help them and they can't help us, there's probably not a good reason to continue a conversation, so move on, right? But we get caught up in some of those emotions, I don't want to anger somebody, etc., and we have a tendency to hide behind those. So think a little bit about the emotions that you bring to the table. What are you worried about happening there, and what could you do that's opposite of that to maybe make it more comfortable, right? Sometimes it just starts with, I'm not going there to educate people, I'm going to figure out who I can help, and it might change the whole mindset of what you have there. Asking for a referral versus an introduction. This is the piece of the networking that sometimes comes after the fact, or maybe it comes during the process where you're talking to somebody who you may not necessarily be able to connect directly with them, but they know somebody that can help you, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what networking is about, is how do we cross-pollinate our networks to figure out who do we know and who do they know that maybe could be matched up together. But the challenge here is we go right for the, can you introduce me? Can you give me a referral to this person? Think about it for a second. When you refer somebody to somebody else, why do you do that? Why do you give a referral? When you refer somebody to somebody else, why do you do it?
I think you can help them. You're helping them on their journey or whatever.
Okay, so you may be helping them, but in order for you to refer somebody to someone, what do you have to feel for that person? If you were to say to somebody, hey, I saw this guy speak the other day, I think you should go talk to him. If you thought I was terrible and you didn't trust me or anything I had, you probably not going to pass me along, right? So there has to be some kind of a connection, a trust, some sort of a bond. Something in the back of your head might say, if I'm going to pass this person along, I want to make sure that it's a good reflection of me and who I am, right? And if we immediately go for a referral on somebody that we don't know very well, we haven't had a chance to get to know, they haven't had a chance to vet us, they tend to shut the process down almost immediately. So if we can, instead of asking to be referred or to be, it's for a straight up introduction to somebody, ask for information. It's a very simple, easy way to just say, look, I know you're connected to so-and-so, and we'll talk a little bit about how you get to know who these people are connected to if you're a technology user in any way, because there's some very good ways to do that nowadays. But rather than asking for the straight-up introduction to be referred to introduce to those folks, ask them for information. What do you know about this individual? What do you know about their businesses and what they do? What do you know about some of their situations? Are you comfortable sharing any of that based on what I've told you about what I do? And lo and behold, many of them will say, well, it might be easier if I just make an introduction and you can have that conversation, right? Then it's their idea, not yours, and the pressure gets taken away. Make sense? So sometimes we often go for the can you introduce me versus, let's talk about how we can get connected, etc. I think we've talked a little bit about this one, lack of patience and unrealistic expectations, right? Some of the challenges that we run into with networking is we expect things to happen immediately, right? As opposed to building a broad network, right? If you think about, I have an acronym up there called COI, Centers of Influence, right? Who are the people that are surrounding the people that you want to meet that it would be useful for you to get to know, right? So if you're looking for, we talked about your ideal client, Alex, the 64 and a half to 60, 65 and a quarter, and likely engaged. Where do those people hang out? I mean, are there financial advisors you should be connected to? Are there other people that serve other types of insurance that might know who some of their clients are? Who are some of the people that might know lots of people that fit that demographic that could help you get to know them? And if they get to know you and they trust you and they like what you have and they see where you add value, chances are they'll open those doors. So sometimes we have this lack of patience. I need to meet somebody today and I've got to go get in front of them right now to find my next prospect. When we think a little bit about who are the people that are surrounding those folks to create relationships, we might open up a few more doors, right? So think about that ideal client and think a little bit about where do they congregate? Who are the people that they rely on for advice? Who are the people that drives them to make decisions, and can you surround yourself with some of those folks? This is one that we often fall into, whether we're selling ourselves or whether we're selling a product or service and we're trying to get to an introduction of some kind. We tend to lead with what we do, how we do it, and why we're better, versus thinking a little bit about what problems do you solve, right? What challenges are the people that you are trying to get to experiencing? And I'll go back to my speaking the language of a fifth grader analogy. Most people don't think in terms of products and services. They think of problems that wake them up at night. So what are the two biggest things that your solution fixes, right? So what are the two biggest problems that you solve for the people that you want to meet? So first articulating what that ideal client looks like from a demographic and a description perspective, but then more importantly, what might they be struggling with? What might they be worried about? What might be keeping them up at night that you can help them fix, right? Articulating how you help, what you can fix in a language that they can understand might cause some light bulbs to go off where people will say, oh, wait a minute, I know somebody who was just describing that concern to me the other day. Maybe you should talk to so-and-so. Right? So simplifying that message, who you want to meet, and then what problems do you solve to help them? Talked about this briefly in the beginning, selling the way we buy. This gets into the baggage we bring around, right? We often think about the things that are necessary to build a relationship as uncomfortable, right? I don't want to walk, don't talk to strangers. We've been taught that since we were, 2, right? So here you are at a networking event where you're supposed to go up and talk to strangers that you've not met before. So we have many things in our head that hold us back from going up and having that conversation, right? We often feel like maybe they're in the middle of a conversation, we don't want to interrupt them, right? So we're awkward about how we think about doing that. Or maybe when we buy something, we want lots of information, lots of data, lots of comparisons. So we have a tendency when we describe what we do to go to the, here's all the stuff that we have, here's a comparison, this is what it costs, and we bring that stuff to a networking event. And all of a sudden, the things that we might use to make decisions doesn't fit with the whole audience, right? Psychology tells us that we're all wired to a certain type of communication style, and we match with about 25% of the population. So if we do things that make us comfortable all the time, 75% of the rest of the population is not comfortable. So sometimes how we think a little bit about how do we conduct ourselves, go outside of our comfort zone, right? Ask for, to be, go up and introduce yourself to somebody that you haven't before, right? Get out of your comfort zone a little bit so you do some things that might be uncomfortable to you and sometimes not uncomfortable to others.
Well, I have one rule. I wouldn't sell what I wouldn't buy, number one. And then others, I've turned down, like I have a bunch of clients, they all want dental insurance. And it's the worst thing in the world. It is, seriously. You will never, ever make out your premiums versus what they're offering. Right? You're better off going up to a dentist and asking, hey, if I pay in cash, a lot of times they'll knock it down 10% or they'll structure your payments or whatever. But dental insurance is terrible, and they're always chasing me. I said, I'm not going to offer it, and a lot of my clients ask me for it, and I tell them flat out, I wouldn't buy it. It's an absolute waste of money. And I don't know why people are, enamored by these ads that they see for it and say, well, take a look at how it's capped, and they're capping it at $1,000. You're already paying $700 in premium, and you've got a deductible of $100. So you better get a lot of services before you even dig into it. It's terrible,
Well, but sometimes in that too, there's credibility that gets built on that. Why do you think you need dental insurance? Where do you think it's going to get you? And you kind of ask those questions, right, to kind of pull that information out. But sometimes when we get into that thought process of I've got to, give people information the same way that I'm comfortable receiving it, we sometimes overwhelm or sometimes we leave, critical details out. The key is figuring out, well, what do they need, right?
Well, the other thing was that number 4 that you had on the giver's gain. I've had a lot of people that are 61 or 62, and they ask me about it, and it's like I said, the program's so dynamic. It won't be 3 years from now. I don't even know what it's going to look like. Right. But I have a prescription discount card, not a junky one. I have a really good one that's really effective at the big places, Costco, CVS, Walgreens, all of them, and they honor it, and it's really a very good one. So I give them that card with my name and my number on it. So if nothing else, maybe a couple of years from now, they'll remember, like if they've been saving all along in that thing. So the giver's game in that is I don't get anything out of it except my name gets.
You're paying it forward a little bit, right? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about. Okay, so somewhere I lost a slide. Number 10 slide was here when I looked at this earlier. I'm not sure what happened to it, but it's about leveraging venues. And it might be on your printout, but for some reason it's not on my slide deck. So, but it talks a little bit about trying to network only in one venue, right? So if you always go to the same networking event and meet the same people, chances are you're going to end up with the same result, right? So how do you diversify multiple venues if you're going to go face to face? But the wonderful thing about technology nowadays is there is a tremendous amount of ways to network, whether it be through tools like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the biggest social network business connectivity product that's ever been built. There's 300 million people on LinkedIn, and that number is growing by almost 1 million people a month. So it's a continuously growing, dynamic product, and it's very searchable. It's very easy to figure out who is there that might fit your demographic. So again, if you know who you're looking for, you can search for them in that product. The challenge with it is it's a very business-oriented product. So if we go out there and we pretend it's Facebook, which tends to be much more of a social-oriented networking product, and we do the same stuff we do on Facebook, on LinkedIn, people are not going to pay attention. Much like if we use a lot of the business language that we might use on LinkedIn and we bring it to Facebook, same problem, right? Twitter, on the other hand, is another place that you can broadcast and message a lot of different things. And if you can build a follower base, it's a very good searchable tool. But it's also, if you're not messaging in a tight, very simple, short medium, it gets lost in the shuffle. So the thing, when we think about networking in venues, there's, where am I going to find those centers of influence? Where do the people congregate that I want to meet? And how do I get into there to get in and around them is the face-to-face side. If you think about the electronic medium, there's multiple ways to network without ever leaving your desk, right? You can do a lot of that networking for being, not even getting out of your chair, right? Through LinkedIn, through social media, through Facebook, connecting with others. But the challenge is you've got to diversify that message. You can't do the same things you do on LinkedIn, that you do on Facebook, that you do on Twitter. There's a diverse message that has to happen there in order to engage your audience. But it's a tremendous way. If you're only networking in a face-to-face environment, think about some of those venues. And if you want some help, particularly with LinkedIn, we have a book that we've published about 10 secrets to use LinkedIn as a prospecting tool. Very easy read to go and figure out how to make your profile better, how to get some of your messages out via LinkedIn, and then how to do some activities to search your connections to help you figure out who do they know that you should know that'll help you get to that ideal prospect.
And where can you get the book?
You can get it on my website, and I'll give you my card before we go. So let me just recap some of these to help. So we had the 10 challenges at the beginning. Let me go through quickly 10 tips to make you better. First, no surprises, right? The upfront contract, which is what we talked about, just a quick agreement on time, on what you're going to talk about and what the decisions should be taken, so we don't surprise anybody. When we surprise people, they get uncomfortable and they tend to react, and that doesn't end in a good state for anybody. Look to give before we ask, right? If we always go with the mindset of I'm here to give, not to get, chances are the giving comes our way. Pay it forward a little bit. Spend some time to define that ideal client, right? I go back to that. You need to know what you're looking for. You're not going to find it. And the more you can simplify that message, broadens the scope of people who are going to click with, oh, I know somebody who sounds like that. You should talk to so-and-so. The wider you make that lane, the more people can fit through there. Come up with activities that you want to hold yourself accountable for at networking, right? This goes back to the behaviors, right? In some of our programs, we talk about creating a cookbook. When you bake a cake, there's a recipe of all the things that need to go into that cake to make it work right. If you're going to try to get a diverse group of networking contacts, there's an amount of activities that you have to happen. Showing up at events, using some of the social media tools, following up with people after the fact. Think about what the critical things are that you need to do and measure those activities, okay? Acknowledge your fears, right? We all have a child inside of us, and the child is usually fear-based, and when the child kicks into gear, we don't do things that we should, right? So think about the things that make us uncomfortable at those venues and deal with them before you get there, not while you're there, right? Look for introductions and referrals follow. Look for people that you can get introduced to find information out about, get them to trust you and be comfortable with them, and referrals will follow. Be patient, okay? Networking is not about instant gratification. It's about a long process. It's, again, back to that stock market analogy. You're in for the long haul versus, time in versus timing. Right? You might meet somebody who's an instant hit at the first networking event and you expect that's going to happen every time. That's not typical. Typical, it's a time in process. Think about how you help, not what you do, right? This goes into that. Can you articulate to somebody the kind of person that is, what kind of challenges are they having? What are they worried about? What are they frustrated by? What are some of the conditions they might be experiencing that you can relieve them of and to be a good reason to be connected with you, right? As opposed to, this is what I do, this is who I am, this is why I'm great, this is what I've done in the past. People don't think in that context. They think in the context of what it is that is causing them a challenge that they need help with. Think about how, also thinking about not rushing to close, right? Think about how you let people come up with their ideas. This goes back to the ask for information versus ask for an introduction. If you ask somebody for information and it becomes their idea to give an introduction, you're helping them get there versus dictating to them what will happen, right? So stay behind them a little bit and let them come up with the ideas versus you telling them what's going to happen. And then leverage multiple opportunities, right? Think about that social media channels. Think about a diverse area of places that you can go and get connected and meet people. So you're not solely relying on one path, right? There's a lot of easier ways that might be more comfortable. Start slow. Networking can happen anywhere, right? I talk to a lot of business owners, and when they initially start their business, I would say to them, start with the people that are closest to you, right? Start with the people that are closest to you that may be family friends, they may be relatives, they may be close people that you've done business with in the past, and start there. Right? Start with people that you're comfortable, sometimes the people that are closest to you, and then diversify out from there. But diversity is key when it comes to finding the right venues. So I asked you at the beginning for a takeaway. So maybe you could help me out with this. Many of you have smartphones. If you don't, if you could, take down this email address, praxis@sandler.com. It's on the slides, too, if you have it. And if you could, title an email to me, Lesson Learned. Tell me what you learned and what you might take action on as a result today. I think I've thrown a lot of information at you. In typically trying to take action on all of it will create nothing but chaos and frustration. So what was maybe the most critical thing that you heard and the one thing that you might take action on as a result? Because usually when we work on changing something, the more we do one thing, the better we get at it, the higher the likelihood that it sticks. When we try to do a lot of things at once, we create confusion and we end up doing nothing but going back to our old behaviors. So let's start with one. So if you could, send me an email. What did you learn? And then what action are you going to take as a result? And I'll leave it with that. My question slide seems to have disappeared too. Does your flash drive eat slides? I'm not sure what happened there. I'm sure it's my fault. It's not yours. But does anybody have any questions, any thoughts?
No, just they mentioned that you had about the 10 things how to use LinkedIn.
Okay.
That book.
Yeah, I can give you. You can get it. It's a downloadable ebook. If you go to the website that's listed on there, you can download it from there, and you can print it. There's a hardcover book as well, or not a hardcover book, a paperback book as well, and I can point you to that if that's a.
That's great. I'm going to check that out myself.
So if no questions,
What was the name of it?
it's LinkedIn: The Sandler Way is the name of the book. Yeah. Well, on the website you'll find it's a downloadable ebook of it. It's a 68-page ebook, but you can order the book itself, which is the title of it is LinkedIn: The Sandler Way. You can order that off the website. The downloadable ebook is free. The book I think is $22. So.